Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Greg Rucka Spotlight panel. My name is Eric Troutman. I'm a longtime friend of Mr. Rucka and occasional collaborator. And I'm very pleased to be asked to do and editor and occasionally purchaser of alcoholic beverages. And
Yes, sometimes counselor,
so
firearms safety instructor, range officer.
that has happened. So yeah, I don't know if you folks heard what the gentleman said. We'll be opening up the floor to questions in a bit. If you have questions, kind of filter up here to the microphone because they're broadcasting and they'd like the audience to be able to hear you. So without further ado, we're going to spotlight Mr. Rucka. Why comics?
Because like most of us who end up writing them, I found them when I was small and fell in love with them. I did not, however, fall in love with them in, I guess, the same way that so many of the other people I know in the profession did. I mean, there are, the Wades and the Vucics and the Bendises, and I mean, there's a long list of guys and gals that you talk to, and they will tell you, they can remember day and date when they bought their first issue of whatever and the moment. And, I remember buying like little, begging my mom to get like the little Kirby Lee Incredible Hulk reprint.
Oh, yeah.
That they would sell at the, it was the impulse buy position at the grocery store. And I got one of those. I got a Fantastic Four one. I got a Spider-Man one. So I knew all the origins, that Rick Jones and his jalopy, going out there on the bomb range. What was he thinking?
Like you do.
Like you do. I have an older sister who has Down syndrome, and when we were growing up, she had the purest crush on the Incredible Hulk from the TV show. And she made no difference between Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno in the show. They were the same. And she called Bill Bixby Bixby Bill. And he was her boyfriend as far as she was concerned. And, should they ever meet, she would have explained it in no uncertain terms, I think. And it made perfect sense. It took me a while to figure it out, but it made perfect sense because, Banner, as Bixby played him, was always very gentle and very kind and very understanding, very nurturing. And yet, if there was a threat, he turned into the Hulk, man. And the Hulk never, ever hurt an innocent in the show. You never saw it. So I went into a comic book store in Monterey, California, 5th grade, so I must have been 11. The place had just opened up. And I bought a copy of the Incredible Hulk magazine. There are the Doug Mensch stories, and
right.
And it was the Incredible Hulk versus 3 Mile Island. That was basically the story, and so that was a good one for me. I was like, how is he going to get out of this one? What with it being a nuclear reactor and all. But I bought it to give to my sister, and she had no interest in it whatsoever. I mean, none. She couldn't. I could have. It could have been like, here, I brought you fish. And she would have been like, that does me no good. So I remember very little about 5th grade. That was sort of my lost educational year. But I do remember, yeah, I see you taking note. We're coming back to that. Okay. But I remember going to school with that magazine and tracing the drawings and trying to copy them over and over and discovering that I had no artistic skill whatsoever. And then comics sort of went away, and I went to high school, and when I got to high school, I had known one kid at the school that I went to before I got there, and he introduced me to his friends. And one of the things that bound them all together were they were all Marvel zombies. They were all X-Men fans, all uncanny X-Men fans. So
it was the right time for it.
It was. It really was. So they dragged me into the comic book store, and that's when it happened. If there was a specific moment that, I sort of crossed that Rubicon of being like, I am in for good. It was going to a comic book store for the first time on my own. Like, I had found the store. It was a different store that had just opened in Salinas, California. My mom was off doing something. I had like 40 minutes to kill. I turned the corner. There was this store. I went inside. The guy was like, hey. I was like, hey. He did not smell. He did not give me the hairy eyeball. He did not do the drool, stay away from my collection sort of thing.
This ain't a library.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember flipping through, and I found one of the issues of the Miller Mazzucchelli Daredevil run. And I found it, versus, say, a friend going, hey, have you read this? Or somebody saying, hey, check it out. So it was the first really true independent discovery of magic in that sense. And I read it, and I was like, oh, and I collected the whole run. And at that point, I kind of went, that's when I went overboard. I was buying Fish Police. I was trying everything I could. And that lasted until college. And then, and through college, and then I went to grad school and got poor, and it stopped.
That will happen.
Yeah. So that's the very long answer. Why comics? Just 'cause.
So your path into comics, and forgive me if I'm getting the chronology wrong, is you were a novelist first.
Yeah.
And I, if memory serves, Whiteout was your first published comics work, and you got to them through the novels. Essentially, they knew the novels, or somebody had put the novels in front of them, which is not an unusual path. I'm curious if there were attempts to get into college or to comics before that.
Desperate attempts.
Did you pitch? Did you have a pile of rejection letter? I have a signed rejection letter from Jeanette Kahn from when I was like 14 that I still hang on to, and I'm curious if there's any stories along that line that you have.
I don't have any rejection letters or anything like that. What happened was my first novel got published in 96. It was bought in 94. My God, almost 20 years. And beginning in 91, Jen and I would go to San Diego Comic-Con. And we had a friend who was working at DC, and so when the first novel got published, that friend sort of showed the book around DC, and he had a superior who, that was like, I want to do comics. Of course I want to do comics. And she would try to introduce me to people, and they would always say, get away, kid, you bother me. Stuart Moore, who has since left editing, but was an editor at DC for a long time, told me, I went after him hard because I was pointed to him. And so I, presented, here's my novels and so on. And he doesn't remember, but I remember him turning to me at a San Diego Con and saying, listen, it's not going to happen. Which I was like, okay. But yeah, I used to, I would push the books into people's hands and be like, here I can really write. The problem is that most editors, when you get that point, when you gave them a novel, they would go like, great, he can write prose. He can't. That does not equate to writing comics, and it doesn't. I mean, with good reason, they're going like, and in point of fact, when I was introduced to Joe Nosmak and Bob Schreck at Oni Press way back in the day, the first question Bob had for me, we were sitting down out on the mezzanine deck at San Diego, and I said, here are my novels, and the first question was, you don't want to adapt these, do you? And that was like the first pit trap, because the wrong answer was yes. And I think that what I said to him immediately was, no, I've got an idea for something totally different. I've got this murder mystery set in Antarctica. I think it would be really good. I mean, that would work visually, and you could see him relax. I mean, he was like, okay, now we can talk.
Well, in that era, too, I mean, I recall there were a lot of novelists' names on some comic books, and they were often very poor comic books. So I would imagine editors were pretty gun-shy if they were like, we got a guy who does prose, and he's going to fight over every word, and, so I can understand why that would be
I certainly, and I think even now, we've seen, there are a lot of novelists who've come into comics now, even on mainstream stuff, and they, under no circumstances, should have been allowed access. They shouldn't. They shouldn't. It's a very different beast. It's
So let's talk about that. What do you think are the key differences between the two? Like, what as a novelist do you struggle with in comics, and vice versa? When do you find yourself fighting your comic inclinations in prose?
Well, I mean, comics are an epistolary form, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
I've come to think of it more as an epistolary form. And that's not the comic you're reading. That's not what I mean. I mean, scripting for comics is an epistolary form. My script is a letter to my collaborators. That letter illustrates to them the story we're trying to tell, the ways I think are best to tell it, the important moments in the story. I want my collaborator to be able to read it and understand, okay, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and then with that information, improve upon it. I don't view it as the Bible. I don't view it as gospel. So right there's an immediate difference in how I approach writing a comic, because a novel is not a conversation. My goal in a prose narrative is to trap you. I want you to open it up, and then I want you to not be able to get out until it's over. And I don't want you to want to get out until it's over. If I do it well, I'm going to carry you along. This, whitewater rafting trip might be a good analogy for it, but I want you to go hurtling along the journey, and I want to be able to grab your emotions and show you things and make you feel. If I've done it right, when it's over, ideally there will be something that will linger, and hopefully it won't be, wow, Rucka just wasted X many hours of my life. But there will be something that you will hearken back to. So, and that's a very different crafting process, because I can wander all around in a comic book script because I'm talking to you.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if I'm trying to tell you about, Athena Bell and how she feels about this boy, and she's 16 and he's 16, and they just went through this thing together, and he had surgery because of it, and he's better, and she's in love, she thinks, but she doesn't know what that is, and her body is she's getting weird signals from her body, and they were kissing, and it was really hard to only just be kissing. I need to be able to offer that in a succinct and believable manner, and ideally in not only a believable but an empathic manner. I guess I want you to connect with it. I want you to understand her stomach ache when she leaves, and how she feels kind of sick, after spending an hour and a half making out with her boyfriend, and then going home, and she's like, I feel kind of queasy and great, I mean, so.
For those that don't know, Greg is referring to characters in his most recent series of, soon-to-be series of novels. The second one is now.
The second one comes out in July.
First one is Alpha, and I would commend it all to your attention. It's a wonderful book.
Bravo.
And Bravo will be out
July 2014.
You seem to do a lot of novel series. I find that interesting.
I think it comes from the gaming background.
Okay.
I've thought about that.
Because there's Kodiak, there's
Yeah.
the Queen and Country stuff, which has also got the comics connection, obviously,
Yeah.
and now the Bell books.
Yeah.
Do you have a standalone just...
Well,
here's
I mean,
the one thing
right
I'm
now
do.
Mim does. Right now Mim is standing
Right.
alone over in Fistful of Rain, but she got recruited for
Stumptown.
Stumptown. I'm very bad at leaving characters alone. I want them to have an ending. So the story can end, but until the character is sort of resolved some way, like you could say Atticus is done right now. You could literally read Walking Dead and be like, that is a fine place to end for him. That is if there was never another Kodiak novel, that would make sense. And I'm content with that. But I do think, I found comics about the same time I became a serious gamer. Do you think that there is a connection there? And when I talk about gaming, I talk about D&D and role-playing games. And I'm a huge role player. I don't do it nearly as much as I used to. But I think as a writer's exercise, role-playing games are... there are few better writer's exercises that you can engage in than sitting down with a peer group, creating individuals, investing them with life, and then telling a narrative collectively. you know.
It'll certainly keep you on your toes because you have the variable of,
Yeah.
well, what Bob did just completely blew my story up, so
Exactly.
I have to work
So I
fast
gotta
to
do
fix
something else.
that.
And what is my character's story versus the story that's being told here, right? You know, our job together is we're going to slay the dragon and free the princess. That's the plot. But it turns out, you know, so what does this mean to my character? Well, why am I doing this? And being able to work that out and think about it and to have fun doing it and to engage in the give and take, I think is an extraordinarily useful tool in learning how to write. I really do believe it. I commend it. If you are an artist of any sort, I think you should be a gamer. I really do. If you want to be an actor, you want to be a musician, writer, or artist of any sort. But because of that, I tend to, you know, I like the characters. I want to spend more time with them, and I want to explore them more. And I guess I've yet to write a story where I feel like whatever the character was dealing with at the beginning is resolved enough at the end that, well, we're done for now. You know, these people go on and on for me. And there's also, I think, if I'm totally honest, I also think that there's an element of genre to it. You know, the PI genre requires, in many instances, the ongoing character. And I think that was part of Kodiak, too. Kodiak was never, ever envisioned to be just one story.
Right.
Bell, by the same token, has very actively been like, we want a series of these novels. Okay, well, then we'll come up with a series character.
So you mentioned acting,
Yeah.
and I know you, in your background, you did fight choreography for the stage.
Yeah.
Did you want to be an actor at one point?
I did. At one point, I wanted to be an actor, but I knew it wasn't good enough. The really
There
good
are
one.
many actors who probably have had that realization, and yet.
Well, okay, I wasn't good enough nor handsome enough. All right? You can stink, but if you're gorgeous, you'll be okay. Or you can be just paper bag over the head ugly, but if you can, you know, blow people out of their seats, you will compensate. You become beautiful. In that moment, the sexy appears. And I number one, I don't think I was never going to be that good. Number two, I don't think I was ever going to, because I was self-aware enough to know if I wanted to act for a living, this is the trajectory of your life.
Right.
You're going to go to school, you're going to finish up school, you're going to maybe try to get into a graduate program that will allow you to hone your skill. Like if you get into Yale drama, you'll be okay. What were the odds of that, Rucka? Not real good. How many people in the country are shooting for Yale drama? And then from there, you know, what am I going to? I'm going to move to L.A. and I'm going to wait tables and hope until an undetermined point in my future. At least with writing, what I did was if I'm not published by the time I'm 33, I told myself that would be the sign that maybe I should pursue something else. All right, but I figured I would give myself at least that long to go and go and go. So I started doing fight choreography because I like sword fights, and I wanted to do that, and it was cool. And I had done fencing, and I was like, you know, I didn't like fencing; it was too competitive. You know, fencing was all about touch. It's like, but we were going to swing swords, man.
Errol Flynn.
Exactly. And I mean, the great thing about stage combat is it's not about who's going to win. It's about how cool it looks. And that was what I wanted. Because you knew from the start, if you're doing a stage fight, you know who's going to win. It says in the script. Right here. Uh-oh. You know, okay, Tybalt. All right, we got it. Let's get to work now. Let's make it a good fight. I spent one summer in a repertory theater company where all I did for that company was die. I mean, that was my job. I came out to sword fight and die. I did, first production of the day was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and I wasn't in that one. And then there was a living chess game, and I was a knight. So I had like 3 fights and then would die. Then there was the production of Three Musketeers. I died like 6 times over the course of that production. seriously, I mean, it was because I was one of Richelieu's guards. I had so many fights to memorize, you know. And sometimes it would be like 2-move fight, clank, clank, dead. And sometimes it'd be like, you know, no, this is actually this time you're going for it. You're chasing them around the fountain. It was outdoors. It was in a plaza. Then the second chess game, different night, and then Romeo and Juliet.
And you were?
I was a Montague. I was an extra. Again, like I said, my job was to die. So I wasn't even third spear bearer from the left. I was just a guy who occasionally walked through scenes and had unrequited crush on Juliet. And I had no lines and several fights. You know, fist fight, sword fight, stuff like that.
So I think it's fair to say that your writing is typically identified with very strong character work. You're a very character-first writer in my own experience working with you, and certainly as a reader.
Yeah.
And that certainly shows in the work. But I can only think of 2 instances, Whiteout and Stumptown, where as good as the characters are in it, you've made the place a character too. And they're both very different. I'm curious if that's a conscious choice, and how you feel you've changed your approach to that in the intervening years between the 2.
First and current.
There will be a quiz, by the way.
You know, Whiteout was the setting always had to be a character, because you don't set something in Antarctica and then not remind and not use that in everything. I mean, it's like saying we set the story on a space station. Okay, well, that demands certain complications, you know, and if you ignore those complications, you're not using it. But Antarctica always had a personality and a persona to me.
Not a very friendly one.
No, but not a belligerent one, in my opinion. To me, Lovecraft, Antarctica is very much a Lovecraftian creature, in that mythos sense. It's not that it doesn't like you; it just doesn't care. It doesn't notice you. You know, you are to Antarctica what an ant is to you.
Antarctica is crumb.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just okay. That was silly of you, you know, to come out here and expect me to be kind. That was foolish. It gets cold, didn't you notice? You know, and I think with Stumptown, the sense of place is always crucial to the private eye story. So one of the very first things that I encountered in Stumptown was, where is this going to be? It's going to be in Portland. Is it really Portland, or is it a take on Portland? Well, it's a take, because it's got to be a certain. I mean, you know, this is why. You know, Hector Marenko lives out in Coast City, right? Because if you know your Chandler, right, that was his sort of Malibu, Santa Monica code. It wasn't, you know, it's not Lincoln City, it's Coast City. You know, you're never going to go out to Lincoln City and Stumptown. You're only going to go out to Coast City, because I can make it as corrupt as I want and not get sued. So it's interesting. I mean, those are 2 very deliberate instances. I wonder at something like Lazarus, because I do think that world is very much its own character too, but it's an evolving character. It's not the same. And it's not the same kind of character, I guess.
No, it's very much not.
Well, and I mean even how it interacts, because it is sort of a status quo. It isn't. It doesn't react, I guess, and I guess that's one of the things. Is you read Whiteout in particular, I think, and you can see Antarctica reacting to the story in certain places. You know, things happen in the story simply because the location says something's going to happen now, and that's my prerogative, because I'm like that. And to a lesser extent, Stumptown does. I think that's going to evolve more in the next Stumptown arc, simply because it's going to deal with 3 very separate places. You know, it's going to deal with Portland and Jeld Wen. Okay. It's going to deal with Seattle and the Clink, and it's going to deal with Vancouver and, you know, and Whitecap. So.
Okay. So you had characterized Antarctica in Whiteout as being kind of an unfeeling Crom figure, kind of above it all. Who is Portland, in your estimation?
Oh, this is going to sound horrible.
You're welcome.
I actually, when I think of Portland, and when I personify Portland, I think of the statue of Portlandia. I do. I've got a crush on her. I do. All right. I remember the first time I saw it was not the full size. I saw one of the bronze studies. I was in a hotel lobby, and I thought it was beautiful. And I'm a sucker for classical sculpture. I always have been. I can stare at stuff like, and I think what happened, I think the reason for that was I was, shortly after the Vietnam Memorial opened, I was in D.C., and it was on a cold and rainy day, and I walked that memorial, and I saw the statue of the three soldiers, and it broke my heart. And, it's a statue. It's a memorial statue. And it's not representative. It's not meant to be metaphorical in any way. It is classic, literal statuary with its loaded symbology. And
it's one of the saddest things I've ever laid eyes on.
It is one of the most profoundly moving pieces. And so, ever since then, you hit me upside the head with that, and you get my attention. I'll look at Rodin's The Thinker for hours because I actually do go like, wow, that's amazing.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, so everyone here can take a moment to not cry. A long time ago, in one of the interviews I had read of yours, you had talked about how you write about the things that make you angry.
Yeah.
And I've known you for a fairly long time now.
Yes, you have.
And I know a lot of the things that make you angry, but I'm curious, as somebody who also kind of comes from a place of anger in everything I do, it gets tiring.
They totally don't get it.
He knows.
Yeah, Eric burns with a red-hot incandescent flame. Like
that's usually just around Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw the Nerd Fight panel at all earlier, and you thought that when I went off, that was impressive, you ain't seen nothing. You ain't seen nothing. You wind him up, and it is grab your helmet and get to cover. So
my question
is, what is the minimum safe blast
distance?
No.
And it's hard to articulate because these folks don't know you as well as I do, but your anger seems different now.
As compared to?
As opposed to Walking Dead era Rucka. What is it that's making you angry when you're writing now? What are the things that are angering you and demanding that you comment in the form of your work? And where do you see yourself in it?
Well, I do think I have a different kind of anger now because I think a lot of the anger that I had prior to 2009 got broken. In the period from 2009 till about late 2012 was very difficult for me. The period where I left DC and I stopped working in the mainstream, and then Steve Wacker was like, "No, come here, do Punisher." And while I was doing Punisher, quote unquote, in the mainstream, I couldn't have been more outside of the mainstream as far as Marvel is concerned. I mean, I existed only in as much as I was writing the Punisher and Steve Wacker was my editor, and nobody else. I was not an entity. And I think, and I dealt with some really severe depression. And a lot of my anger turned to despair. And I do a lot of research and I do a lot of reading. My morning routine right now is, since the kids have gone back to school, is I get up between 6 and 6:30, and I go down to my office with a cup of coffee, and I turn on my computer, and I open up my newsreader programs, and I open up my Tumblr queue, and I start reading the articles, and I check my mail. And in my mail, I've got a subscription to a company called Stratfor, which you may have heard of. Stratfor, according to Anonymous, are the bad guys. They're not. They're just a bunch of sort of mixed political agenda analysts, some very, very smart men and women, and they send out daily news updates. So if it's been a bad night in the world, I'll wake up to 60 emails from them where they have basically been updating minute to minute something that's been going on.
And all of them terrifying.
Yeah. And then in the midst of them, you'll get analyses, right? You'll get longer form pieces. You'll get stuff about, like, this is naval movement for the next week. This is what's happening in the geopolitical week ahead. So, like, I read stuff like that. I go through my newsreader. I will find things that I think are germane to whatever instant, thing I may be working on at the time. Lazarus right now is a constantly fed machine. I'll put those into the Tumblr queue. I'll maybe answer a few emails and questions that I will forward to Eric, things that I find particularly interesting or terrifying or both.
Then I contemplate opening a vein, usually.
Yeah. There's some stuff I haven't sent you.
Thanks.
And it's funny because you were talking about the world building and shooters and the thumb drive.
Yeah.
And you joke, writers will joke about it, but that which is seen cannot be unseen. I still remember watching the video of the woman who was executed in the soccer stadium in Kandahar in 2001. This was prior to, long before 9/11. This was before anybody knew who the Taliban were. And I was watching this footage, and that's why I was writing what I was writing in Queen and Country. And I will never, ever forget what that body looked like in the moment that she died, in the way she moved. And I will never, ever forget some of the descriptions I read when I was doing research for Walking Dead. And I will never, ever forget some of the descriptions I read about this freaking rape trial in India and so on. I mean, and there are things, and I have 2 kids. And, after a while, it really starts to hurt. Mm-hmm. And it starts to hurt so much. And right now, where we are in the world is so desperately bad. And people, so many people know it, but they don't know what to do about it. We don't know how to answer it. We don't know how to speak to it. And therefore, what we want to do is turn away. Because it's easier to talk about Breaking Bad than it is to talk about the fact that right now the government is so malfunctioning that people are dying. It's easier to talk about the stuff, and I feel the appeal. It's killing me. I hate it. And there's a piece of me, you see it touched on in Alpha. There's more about it in Bravo. I forget the name of the guy I heard being interviewed. He was talking about this new book. The analysis of the situation in Washington now is, these people, they have split the country between blue and red. And that's not what it's about. They have done this, so we're also frickin' busy arguing about stuff that's common sense so they can make more money. And it doesn't matter. The party doesn't matter. The culture of wealth now that is tied into Washington and into politics is appalling. It's disgusting. How much is enough? And, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist simply because I know enough about how the government works. And they can't keep a damn secret. They can't. It's like any other business. How many of you work in an office? How many of you in that office have heard about X's affair with Y? The chief of the CIA couldn't keep it in his pants, and we knew about it. And people think that, and people are going, "Oh, it's a conspiracy." It's not. There are secrets. That's different. A secret is not a conspiracy. But these grand conspiracy theories, they're garbage. These people do not serve us. They don't care about us, but they've got us arguing as if they do, as if our way of life is threatened. Well, it is, but not by the stuff that they want us to think it's threatened by. It drives me crazy, and we were arguing about this at the table. I think the greatest sin in American culture right now, and I think artists need to step up because journalists are failing in this, is this bullshit belief in an objective media and in reportage. We don't have any journalists anymore. And the journalists we have say things like the alleged perpetrator, and they'll say, you know, 17 people were shot in Chicago, including a 3-year-old boy. There's no outrage there. There's no outrage from a journalist who says, you know, we have seen so many people murdered in the last 12 months because there are no gun control laws of any merit. And when it finally goes to the Senate, what the people have said they want is refused. And what did the media do? They just reported on it. And there really should have been, we are now going to read the names of everybody who voted no. And now we're going to tell you how much money those no votes received from the NRA. Do your damn job. I am so appalled by this failing. And I do not believe in the objective journalist. I think that's a fallacy. And I think we should be very suspicious of it. I really do. I really do. You know, I mean, God, the whole Putin thing. Yeah. I have a draft in my folder of a post about here's why we should not be listening to this man. Reason number one, do we know, how many of you know what Putin was before he was Putin? Right. He stopped being KGB. Why? Because the Soviet Union stopped existing. You know what rank he held? He was a lieutenant colonel in the KGB. This is the guy who runs Russia and has been running Russia since 1999 and has floated now a new story saying he's thinking about running for a 4th term. You really think he's democratically elected? I mean, really? Do you think he's doing anything in the best interests of Syria? Never mind the United States. In the Syrian best interest? Really? I mean, really? I'm not saying, you know, and I'm not saying, yes, we need boots on the ground in Syria. You know, the fact of the matter is there are 1,000 bad solutions to the problem because the problem was ignored for 2 years. Almost 3 now. But, you know, and again, Syria is hard. It's hard. And the media is going, ooh, war footage. Oh, fuck, we didn't get it. All right, let's blame somebody. Let's go after Obama. Obama's a pussy because he didn't want to kill people. How very American of us. How delightful. Syria is hard. So read and try to understand it and question your sources. Don't sit there and go, it's too hard. Because the second it gets too hard, that's the moment you disconnect. And they want us disconnected. And I know now I'm sounding like a rabble-rouser, and I don't mean to, but this is the stuff that infuriates me right now. It's killing me. I hate it. I will not listen to the news anymore. I will not do it. I walk into the kitchen, and my wife, Jen Van Meter, will be in there, and we're getting ready for dinner. She'll have NPR on, and I will walk over, and I will now do it. I've done it so many times that she sees me coming. She grabs the remote and switches to the classical or jazz station. It is just, I will not do it anymore. I will not listen. Because so much of what is being broadcast, and we were talking about this, the broadcast outlets are pushing the information to you. And they're pushing information they want you to have. That is not the same as informing you. That's indoctrinating you. And that sounds more sinister than I think any of them actually would say it is, but that's what it is. ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, all the mainstream media outlets are quote-unquote on message. And you've all heard that phrase, and you know it. You know it. And the number one thing they sell you is fear. Because if you're scared, you're easier to manipulate. And that's not because they're going, and that's how we'll stay in power. It's going, no, that's how we get more money from you. That's entirely based on Madison Avenue. Well, I scare you, and then I can say, this will make you feel better. We buy shit when we're upset. It makes us feel better. And we've all had that experience of going and being like, you know what, I'll pick up this video game. I'm not sure I like it, but I feel horrible about stuff today in a way that I can't articulate. This will make me happier. I've just eaten all of our time. Do you want to go to Q&A?
We're good.
Okay. I'm sorry, and I feel bad. I feel like I've just, you know, I feel like half the room's going like, God, did they lock the doors? Can we get out? You know? But
actually, I think it's highly illustrative of a point I was planning on making shortly. And I'm going to talk about you like you're not here.
Okay.
Breathe. Breathe. We're good.
I'll go off.
I suspect most of you in this room are aware of Greg's work and fans of it because you emotionally connect with the material. Is that a fair assessment? Now you know why. I've watched Greg write these books. I've been on the receiving end of the phone call at 11 o'clock at night going, ah! And
There's a lot of,
and why I think, and he's going to hate that I'm going to phrase it this way, this is why Greg Rucka is an important writer. He writes entertaining fictions. He writes believable and likable characters. The level of passion you've just seen displayed here, magnify that a few times, and that's what's going into the work. And it intimidates the hell out of me every time. But on that note, so let's talk about Lady Saber for a minute.
Yes. let's talk about a different type of passion.
Well, in the quote-unquote serious work, it's not that Lady Saber isn't an endeavor that you are taking seriously,
right,
but it is lighthearted and playful in tone.
Yes.
Is this
it is definitely all ages.
Is this is this deliberate in terms of the darker stuff you're dealing with in the other material? Was that part of the process? I mean, do you find this therapeutic? Does this help when you're writing? Does it help you deal with that anger?
Yeah.
And is Lady Saber a symptom of that?
It was not. Lady Saber was not initially designed as, oh God, I need a palliative. You know, I gotta find some place where I don't want to like cut my throat every day. But it was very much an answer to two things. It was Rick Burchett and I desperately wanting to work together after having known each other for 15 odd years and having done maybe 5 works together total. And it was also wanting to do something that was, well, you've read the introduction to that. Which Robo Trade was it?
Oh, right. I forget which one, but yeah. Atomic Robo. He wrote a wonderful introduction to it.
Have any of you guys read Atomic Robo? Brian Clevenger and Scott Wegener? All right. Those of you who haven't, please correct this. I'm sincerely meaning this. Pick up the first trade, all right, Atomic Robo. If you go to the Atomic Robo website, and you can see they've got a thesis, what they wanted to do with the comic. And one of the first things they say is, we wanted to have fun. I had been at DC for a decade, almost, and fun was not something that you had when you made comics at DC. That was one of the reasons why I was not at DC anymore. And I desperately wanted to do something that was going to be fun for us. That would it would be light, and it would be delightful, and maybe whimsical even, but would also have some excitement and sword fights. It had to have sword fights, you know? And it's been a delight. So I absolutely... You know, the problem that I have with almost everything is that I always find myself working on too many things at the same time, and I fear I never give anything the time they deserve. One of the things that I really am hoping to do in the next year and a half is dial back on certain kinds of work so that I can say, you know what, I'm doing Lazarus, I am doing Unnamed Book, I am doing Lady Saber, I am doing novel. That's it. That's it. And I'm going to commit to these things, to making them each the best they can be and as total as they can be, and hope that in so doing, there will be some financial remuneration that will allow me to keep doing it. Because part of the other reason that, I'm a freelancer, so I take work so I can feed my family,
On that note, does anyone have questions? If you have questions, I think we're going to open it up
Come
here
to
because
the mic.
we've got about 15 minutes left thereabouts. So, yeah, come to the
And
mic so
also,
everyone
as
can hear
you.
you.
Tell my answers are long, so. Yeah.
So you have posted a lot of very interesting thoughts about video game narrative.
Yeah.
The way storytelling works in like the BioWare games. You
Yeah.
post a lot about
Yeah,
this.
we've got the N7 shirt on, yeah.
So a long time ago, I suggested that you check out Telltale's Walking Dead game. Have you yet?
I have not yet, and now I understand that all the episodes are completed and available. And it's funny because one of the guys who was working on the game has been staying with us this weekend. It was one of the software guys. So, and sadly, I don't know when I'm going to be able to because I have walked into super busy. Now, when I get out of super busy, there are video games I want to play. I still haven't played Heavy Rain. I haven't played The Last of Us. Both which I'm told are excellent narrative games, and I'm waiting for Dragon Age 3, obviously, though everybody else is, and that'll be a while. So I'm told it's at least another year out. But yeah, look, I think there is a day coming that that type of game is about to break through as an entirely new art form with the same power and presence as literature, theater. If you think about the potential of being able to, you go to a play and to experience that catharsis, you see a movie, you read a book, you think of those really rich, best emotional moments. Imagine what that emotional moment is like if you get there through choices you have made, that the story you have watched is your interactive novel. People talk about those types of video games as interactive movies, and they're not, because movies are spectator sports. You sit in a theater, you all share it together. I think interactive novel is a much better descriptor. And when they crack that nut that says, no, you can do anything, and still figure out the way that the anything you do will direct to that emotionally resonant ending, oh my God, it's going to be more powerful than crack.
Play The Walking Dead.
Okay. Come on up.
That should be their new ad tagline. Play The Walking Dead. It's crack.
It's more powerful than crack. Better than crack.
Sorry.
Hi, Mr. Rucka.
Yeah.
So I stopped by your table and I asked you really briefly about the Gotham Knight bonus feature that you did
Yeah.
years back, and the awesome Riddler joke that I use to kind of tell my friends who don't know that character.
Yeah.
Can you share, do you do more bonus features, or what was that like doing that?
I don't. It's weird. I used to, again, when I was hot at DC, I would get calls occasionally, and it was like, well, can we shoot you for extras on this DVD or whatnot? And sometimes it would be. There was once I happened to be down in LA, and they were shooting this old theater, and so they had me come in, and I remember sitting there, and you sit there, and they point a camera at you, and then they ask you a question. And you're supposed to answer it but not look directly at the camera, and then they'll say, well, now can we try it again? You'd be like, I don't know what and like I said, I ramble, as you can tell. And I'm like, really, you want me to remember what I just said to you about, Two-Face? Are you out of your mind? So I know I'm on, I think I'm on the Elektra DVD somewhere.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it.
And I don't know where else I am. I can't watch myself.
Whiteout. You're on the Whiteout DVD. I know that.
Oh, yeah, great. You're not using that for a coaster, So you're welcome. Hey.
So this is kind of like a two-part question. I admit it's slightly morbid fascination, but I do kind of want to get your opinions on this. In certain circles on the internet, the abandoned Wonder Woman pilot from 2 years ago has kind of started making circles. First off, I wanted to ask if you've seen it.
The David Kelly one?
Yeah.
Yeah. it wasn't true to any iteration of Wonder Woman I'd ever encountered.
Yeah, exactly. So, in terms of adaptation, do you feel, or like writing someone else's characters, do you try to remain true to that character, A, and B, why do you think, in your opinion as a writer, why do you think it's so hard for certain other people to kind of do that? Because
Very diplomatically put.
That is. I think especially in comics, I blame an awful lot on Frank Miller. And one of the things I really blame on Frank Miller is that he came along and he said, Batman, I'm going to just throw all this out. And now it's my take on Batman. And everywhere in the comics community, all these people went, you can do your take on Batman? Well, I want to do my take on fill in the blank. There was a time when you could read comics and writers would change on the book and you would not immediately know. You would figure it out because the story would start to slide away. And now when a writer changes, when a creative team shifts, you know it happens because that's the issue where 18 people died. And those 18 all happen to be the characters that the other guy had created. I mean, they clear the decks as quickly as possible. And I've been guilty of this. And it took me a while to realize the sin I had committed. There is an incredible lack of respect. And it's because everybody's searching for that ego stroke. They want to be the one who did their take. They reinterpreted it. They did it their way. It's not terribly hard to remain true to a character that has been around for 50, 60, 70 years.
exactly why I asked.
I mean, you know what that core is, right? You know how Superman's going to respond to certain things. Because he's Superman. So so you would think that it's a no-brainer. Except, of course, then, other instances come, well, we need something to get people talking. We need to have a darker ending because people don't believe in that kind of thing anymore or whatnot. It's like, you know what? Horse hockey. I love the Captain America movie, man. I love that movie so much. And I know there's so many people who are like, oh, that's not my favorite Marvel movie. And, okay, I loved it. I loved its idealism. I loved that it was unashamed of itself. I loved that it never apologizes for itself. And I love the moment that scrawny Steve Rogers throws himself on the grenade, man. And Tommy Lee Jones has to be like, he's still skinny. Because he's got nothing after that. All I got is he's skinny, and we're about to fix that part too. Damn it. I love them. Man of Steel should have been Captain America.
I was going to say, I didn't want to say it.
No, you should have walked out of Man of Steel with that same thrill and optimism. You walk out of Captain America, and even with that very bittersweet ending, I took my son to see it. I guess Elliot would have been 11. And he was shocked by the ending. He didn't know, right? He didn't know the lore. So when he realized that, and that last line of, like, I had a date, and Elliot choked up. And he was like, I didn't, and still choked up, walked out of that movie like this, I got to tell you, it is a rare thing right now to be proud to be an American. That movie made me proud to be American. You know what I mean?
It looks like we have time for about one more question, so come right up.
Now I feel really weird with my question. Okay, so this is more of a, I guess, a writing
11.
process thing.
Yeah.
But I mentioned while I was in chair earlier, I've been sort of catching up on a lot of your old novels.
Yeah.
And it always strikes me where all of your novels, to my memory, are first-person novels.
All the Kodiak novels and Fistful is a first person. The others are all third.
No Man's Land and Thirst.
Yeah, and the Q&C novels are third person, and the Bell series are third person. So.
Well, anyway, I guess what I'm saying is it's more specified towards the first-person novels.
Yeah.
Specifically, there was Fistful and the
Yeah, Shooting at Midnight.
That's it. I knew it was shooting something, but anyway.
Well, it's a Rucka book.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Something's getting
you were
shot.
safe.
Right. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do you write characters that making bad decisions? Like, especially from like that first-person perspective, where you know, as the writer, the omniscient of, clearly this is a terrible idea. Why are you doing
Yeah.
it? How do you get
Yeah.
into the mindset?
How do you?
Clearly, this is the best idea.
Well, I suppose if you're doing the job properly, then you understand how they get there.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it goes back to the world building thing, about the sailboat, and it does answer its own question, why is the boom down here? Because if it was up there, the boat wouldn't be a sailboat. Right. It would be a capsized boat. So what's the choice? We don't go anywhere, or you learn to get out of the way of the boom, right? Still stupid design.
Because it's sure as hell hard to read. I don't know how you write it.
Yeah, and especially like Shooting at Midnight is difficult because you're watching a junkie go through extraordinary contortions to justify becoming, going back on heroin. Right. And you know that that's never going to end well. I mean, you know that.
This Full Rain's a lot of the same reason, where it's just like,
yeah,
maybe I should call the cop. No, that's a terrible
idea. Yeah.
I'll drink some more.
Yeah, you know what would make this problem better? Drinking. Yeah, Mim is. I think Fistful's an interesting novel because I've had some people tell me they hate that book. They couldn't read it because because Mim is she's an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
That's exactly. Well, and not only that, I mean, at least Bridget is honest. Yeah. Bridget told you the truth all the way through Shooting. Mim lies to you from the get-go. Right. Because she's lying to herself. I'm totally in control of my drinking. No problem. I can quit whenever I want. And you're watching her going, liar girl, liar girl. And you expect me to, and you get angry at Mim because it's like, man, you're lying to me and you're not even giving me the courtesy. I saw what you did. You don't get to pretend that didn't happen. I was there. You told me about it. I can jump back 8 pages. See? And I've always responded, yeah, Mim's difficult to take. That book is about the fact that she has been lying to herself about certain things for a very, very long time. And yeah. Different story, so.
Different story.
That it? All right, you're free to go. We'll unlock the doors now.
Thank you all very much. And thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Eric.